Good evening and welcome to this episode of Nerds and Nite Gaming. I am Kid Thunder DJ, joined as always by
Pirate 47.
Alright, so it's been a little over a week, almost 2 weeks now, just because still, getting over being sick and stuff, so doing the 3 YouTube videos we recorded, took it out of my voice, so we're back though, and we got a pretty good show. We're about a week past the Royal Rumble, so we're going to have a lot of wrestling scenarios to talk about, especially as we're now on the official road to WrestleMania, and where things can go from there. Talk about Resident Evil 7, which we picked up recently. Also Gravity Rush. And, this isn't on the sheet, but we also got to experience some of the quote-unquote joys of owning a PlayStation 4 Pro, which we'll get into here in a minute. I'm going to start with that. Other than that, Fireheart, you got a piece you're going to talk about later on. You want to give us a little preview?
Yeah, there was a
tease, as we say in the business.
Right, that's kind of what they did. Essentially, there was some quote-unquote news that was going to happen on Final Fantasy, but it kind of simmered down to nothing as much as we had hoped, but we'll get into that later.
All right. So anyway, we're going to start today just talking about the PS4. And, last year, around this time, we picked up 4K TVs. And, of course, nothing's really using them yet, but it was cool to have. We needed new TVs anyway, and we found good post-Christmas deals. And thought, well, when I'm ready to introduce my younger sons to having their own PS4, just for the important lesson of if you want something new, you go out and buy it because they're 15 and 16 respectively, I got myself the PS4 Pro, and they don't know it yet, but they'll get my PS4. I have them convinced right now we're gonna sell it to GameStop for more games. But first of all, I will say this. If you upgrade the system to the newest firmware, which is also through the newest update, there can be a lot of problems if you don't have the newest 4K TV. We had to play around a lot with the settings. We had to turn off a lot of the automatic detection. We had to drop the, I believe they call it HMDC or something like that, down to the 1.5 instead of auto.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah, we had to manually set the resolution to be the right kind of 4K.
Yeah, we sat there resetting the dang thing like 4 or 5 times.
Right. And
so it can be a bit of a hassle to set up.
Every time you power cycle it, before it'll let you change resolution, you have to go through scanning the hard drive, which is a 1 terabyte drive. So
even empty, it still took forever.
Yeah, even empty, it still took a good minute or two. And we're trying to do all this to get it up and running just to make sure the thing would work.
Right.
A couple things, I do recommend using the cable it comes with. It is a high-speed HDMI cable, so it will support the transfer. I had another high-speed cable, but I suspect that was part of the problem, so go ahead and use the one that comes out of the box. It's not as cheap as you would think it would be. Definitely figure out what your 4K standing is and, what version and what versions are supported, and do your best to preset your system to that before you let it update. Kick off the updates, set everything up first for what it's going to be post-update, then let it update, and you shouldn't have any trouble.
Yeah.
So, another fun gaming project we started over the break is, at my job, I recently changed jobs. That's another reason for all the upheaval. They had a project they wanted me to do. They brought me 4 Raspberry Pis and said, hey, we want these to be put on TVs around the office. That'll be displaying images they want to upload to them. That'll be metrics and upcoming meeting events and things like that. You're pretty standard fare. Did a little playing around with them, put them together, I ended up using OpenELEC Kodi and got it to work to do it the way they wanted it done. So, just keep playing with them at home because, they were really interesting to me. Picked up the kit for a RetroPie, which works. Its pros are pretty simple. I mean, you and I recorded.
A couple of our last couple of videos we have been using it.
Right, and it's great for that quick switch. It's great for the fact that it's HDMI native. So if you are a fellow YouTuber or you want to be able to do something like that, it's a lot better than trying to find an upscaler for most game systems or a recorder that can use AV. Not all systems take AV, like the Model 2 Genesis is really hard to find AV cables for it unless you go aftermarket. So it's a great utility for that. We did notice some fun little peculiarities of it, like what happened when you tried to turn the volume down. What happened to it?
Oh yeah, didn't it keep crashing?
Right. It would just freeze. our TV volume, we tried to turn our TV volume down and it would just freeze. Because I'm guessing it was trying to send some kind of signal back through HDMI. I'm not sure. And also, it seems to stop playing games well at about the N64/arcade level. And by that, I mean you have to do a lot of playing around with the ROMs to get N64 games to work. And there's trouble with ISO disc switching for the few disc-based systems it supports. So it's a good start. And as these Pi boxes get stronger, I think the system will get better, the RetroPie system. But I'd recommend it for people who want to get a little bit of a background on Linux. And the reason why I say that is why you do have to do some command line stuff with it if you really want to make the most of it. So that's definitely something you want to keep an eye out for if you're looking to expand your Linux horizons. What do you think of it playing on it?
It was pretty fun. Like I said, it worked really well, especially with like the different controller varieties we used. Because like at one point you were just using an Xbox controller, but then we later switched and got a USB Nintendo 64 styled ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we used those, and they were really fun to use.
Yeah, that is one thing I'll give it. It does have it is designed to be natively supported of the Microsoft 360 wired controller. So and apparently it can also use the PS3 wired, so
take your pick.
Which I'm guessing is the off-brand versions, not the core version. But you never know. We didn't really try it. We stuck with Xbox 360 because we have a bunch of those laying around for PC gaming. So
it was funny getting like the different ROM packs you had that you found, and finding just the different like knockoffs and bootlegs and everything else. Like, didn't we play like a Mario in a Sonic world or something?
Yeah, they try to do all kinds of crazy stuff like that. What's real fun is if you're a Genesis fan, something you may know is they've made Tectoy makes licensed Genesis games still. So it's real funny to see some of these weird offshoot new Genesis games, and largely for Brazil. That's the country that still has the rights. And it's real funny to see some of those ROMs. And when you see just how many games were just blatant, basically name swap ripoffs that were actual arcade releases in those Wild Wild West days of laws, there's problems. I mean, not every ROM works, especially in the arcade level. That seemed to be the one that had the most problem. Neo Geo, we had, because each folder is on the back end routed to the emulator it'll use, so we had to move all the Neo Geo ROMs from the Neo Geo folder to the full-born alpha folder just to get them to run. So it is what it is, but definitely a fun thing if you want to learn Linux, get a little bit of retro gaming in, and have some experience with Raspberry Pis, because these things are going to do more in the future. They're kind of where computing's going in place of your desktop. So anyway, let's move out of retro gaming a little bit for now. We picked up a couple modern games. First of all, you finally got the what was it? Dragon Quest. Oh my God, one too many. DBZ, right. The RPG number 500. No, I'm kidding. Dragon Quest 8.
Yeah, I finally got through 7, which we'll talk about that one later in another segment. So I moved on to 8's release on the 3DS, which I'd played the 8 way back on the PS2 when it was originally out. That was a really long time favorite of mine growing up with me and my dad. I'm loving where it is now. I just got Angelo into the party, so I just got about into the Abbey.
Yeah.
The male Abbey. I just got through there, so I mean, I'm still really early on, but I'm liking a lot of the changes they've done to the things. There's some nice additions, like the photo mode actually has like quests you can do of like taking photos of objects or monsters out in the environment and everything else. It's actually a lot of fun. And I know there's new things coming up later of like new characters you can actually get. And
well, yeah, they're going to make that money on DLC.
It's not even DLC though. It's actually like already in the game.
Yeah.
Like some of the old characters that...
If you can unlock it through in-game stuff, then I'm happy for it. If you have to pay money to get it...
No, this is like... These are characters that you met in the original game and will meet again in this one that are actually going to end up joining you in this time. There are new changes to the game that's like...
not cool. So
not just superficial.
They're adding more playable characters, but they're adding them
from characters
contextually, yes.
Right, characters you knew, and like you always kind of wondered like, well, they could possibly have been characters back then.
What would have happened if I'd have had this guy? You get that chance
it's
to do
actually
that.
really
That's cool. I picked up a couple myself. We'll get to the better one in a second. I'm going to go a little bit out of order on the sheet. But I picked up Gravity Rush 2. And I don't know. I'm going to give it kind of a middle rating. And here's why. It's got great elements to it. I thought the gravity control is one of those hard to, or easy to learn but hard to master things, which adds that element of discovering yourself and discovering your powers. It's not broken. A lot of people would be quick to go with, it's just this broken control system. It's not. Because what people don't realize is this person can't fly.
Yeah.
She is literally controlling the gravity around her. Well,
she's making herself fall places as opposed to flying there.
Right. She's basically falling with style.
Right.
So it's a weightlessness more than it is an ability to control herself in flight. So once you kind of expect that and you think in that logical headspace, it gets a lot easier. The combat's a little bit repetitive. There's some cool elements, but there's also kind of... It's one of those sort of hack and slashy type ideas where you could just pound the button enough to get the job done. And I take off points for that, especially for a major release current gen title. That's a little played out.
Right.
Now,
but I mean, like, I played the demo of it and admittedly didn't enjoy the controls to it, but it definitely does seem like something that if you can put the time into to really try and learn like the little gimmicks to it all, it'd probably be worthwhile. But you said you didn't kind of like the way like the dialogue was written or something, right?
Well, yeah, we were going to get to that. Here's some of the things that are a little bit kind of naff about it, and that is the dialogue. It's very jerky. It's very sort of that spoken word out of an anime, which makes sense if you consider who made it and how it's styled.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're reading a manga, I meant to say, which is fine, and there's a lot of people who like that. So it definitely feels more like a game I would have expected out of the PS2 era. Just with prettier graphics, which is fine. That, some of those games work, and some games put an emphasis on gameplay quality.
Kind of depends on like
over visual quality, but they just didn't seem to have.
Maybe the only issue with that might be like the technical level of just like the game processing all the gravity changes, but who knows?
Yeah, all in all, a solid B for a game. I wouldn't quite call it as bad to be a C+, but a solid B. I do think it's going to go on too long, but I don't know yet. But that did make me think games. You talk about a minute ago when we talked about Dragon Quest VIII, just finishing Dragon Quest VII, and you wholesale nicked that game for me. Like how long ago?
A good couple months, and it's like.
And you play a lot because you have no responsibilities or life.
Even still, though, it's like... I was just like...
That is... You know what? For the almost, year now we've been doing these shows...
I was going to say, it wasn't even worth trying to fight you on it.
Well, not even that. No. Listen, this is something of a compliment. In the entire almost year, if you count YouTube, we've been doing these shows. This is the first moment you ever had perfect comedic timing. You should enjoy that. You should right. Enjoy that win.
But no, like, having the chance to, like, finally get through it, I think my hour time clocked out on that around 123, but some of that might have just been like filler time of like, it might have been on, but I might have been like distracted on like the laptop or something. But even still, there was just so much to that game where it's like, when will it end?
Now, how much of that was story though? Because we'll get into that with another topic later in movies, but was
a lot of it actually...
I should say, you were telling me a lot of it wound up being story.
Yeah, because... The basic setup is you keep going to these individual islands in the past, to free them from this curse that like separated all the different islands of the world and kind of segmented them away. And you're essentially going through each place twice to free them, go back to the future or the normal time, and get like probably a missing fragment from them, like check up on the place as well, so you can then go and put that into the next area. And there's probably a good upward to 10 to 20 areas. And then after all that crap, you got to go and fight this demon god crap. You defeat him, and then you think that might be the end of the game, but all of a sudden, no. the good guy or the god that you basically revive is actually evil, and yet then you have to go to fight him, and it's like
you get it at some point,
right,
and you just want it to be done.
Right. It's like after going through the entire world first, and admittedly, a lot of the places really weren't memorable. Like a lot of like just the little individual islands you had to deal with. I mean, some of them were, some of them weren't. But by the time I was done with it, I couldn't remember where was the specific area at, and I just had to like fly around the world until I relocated where everything was at.
Right.
And by the end of it, it felt monotonous.
It did. And that got me thinking about other games that are a little bit too long. Now, when I say too long, here are my caveats. I'm talking about to finish the main story. So your Witcher 3s, your Skyrims, your Fallouts are out, because if you ground just by doing enemy fights and focused on the main stories, you're probably through the game in 10 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, Skyrim, I did the main quest line to finally get through the game, after doing enough side quests to be about level 20, 25 in that range, because I had really done none of the main story. I was through it fast. So though I'm not talking about those kind of games. I'm talking about games where, especially very linear games, you're locked in the story and you're not going anywhere, and they just drag on and on. And the biggest offender for me in recent life was The Evil Within. Such a great game that brought back that low ammo, danger around every corner, horror feel of Resident Evil, was just 10 chapters too long, because you figure out the quote-unquote big twist in the game so early on, and then it just becomes motion over the same thing over and over again. And I had to literally force myself to get through. Now, they were trying to keep you interested with different psychological elements and different visuals, but if you're someone who can figure out a story that you're working on fast enough, and the ending of the book, it's very hard to finish the book, and it's the same for gaming. So that was one for me. Another couple of odd ones I put down on the list, like Bayonetta 2 I'm still playing through, because it's just, again, it's that concept of more of the same. It's a fun game, and it looks awesome, but the one advantage Devil May Cry, at least the early Devil May Cries may have had over it, was they were over pretty quickly. Because once you figured out every combo...
It was a little bit more engaging, I'd say, just story-wise. Because you had that, especially in 3.
Bayonetta was definitely the grab was, here's
the hot chick, here's some flash action.
Clothes, right.
And flash action.
Right, but...
You had a little bit more, to pull you for the story when it came to, Devil May Cry with, the feud between Dante and Virgil. Right,
and the cutscenes were better in Devil May Cry because even though they were rendered in-game graphic level, they were still rendered and not motion comic type visuals that
that too.
Bayonetta had. But still a great game. None of these games are inherently bad. The Evil Within is a great story worth playing. Bayonetta 2 is a fun game, especially if you do like just a good hack and slash with some stylistic combos. Another one, Mario 64, could go on a little long, especially
now, that one
to get all the stars.
Well, that's the thing, though. Your whole caveat was that you were only going what you needed to finish the whole story. But you needed
a certain amount of stars to keep progressing through the game.
Yeah, but by the point that you get, the amount you needed us to get to Bowser and finish the main story was, I want to say, between either 50 or 70. I can't remember which one's accurate.
You're right. It's not.
And that one's not that bad, actually. Especially when you add on, you have to get a whole 120 total. You're getting maybe half.
Yeah, you're still having to get around half, and you're still having to go through all these levels. And there's a lot of levels that are in each zone that are very much skill heavy. So if you don't have those skills, that one is a little. I hesitated to put that one on the list because that one is a little more of a personal issue, because it was really I got to do another fucking race thing with this guy or whatever, because there was a lot of level repetitiveness, and that's what made it drag on. Maybe. What about you? Did you think about any games that were too long for your taste? Besides the one you already spoiled?
Well, that's what I was about to... I don't think I was that bad on it. Besides that one, nothing much really comes to mind.
You say that every time I give you a quote-unquote homework assignment for this show. I'm gonna get an older co-host to join us that knows retro games, so they could actually, do the work here. But no, I get it.
I'm actually seriously trying to think if any.
And believe it or not, I'll even throw in a couple of games that I really cherish that could have been a little bit shorter. You could have trimmed a few hours off of Phantasy Star 4 because they tried to claim over 20 hours of gameplay, and there were a couple things they sent you out to do as part of the main story that felt a little bit more like filler to meet that mark. Yeah, so that's one that could go on there. In modern era, there's probably a good handful of games out there if you really look. The Dragon Ball Z Xenoverse game was pretty much filler after the first fight. Because it wasn't, and that's funny because hours-wise it's not a long game, but it's so repetitive, so fast.
And there's so much like filler crap with the parallel quest and whatnot. And like how much they filled that with like so much like unfair fights of super armor, time limits, crazy enemies, things like that. Yeah. It gets annoying.
So yeah, those are games that take forever. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the other game we picked up this week was Resident Evil 7.
Right.
As bad as the Final Chapter movie is doing, Resident Evil 7, the game, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a new change for the series, but it's doing it well.
Change, not really. I mean, a lot of people tried to give it flack for sort of taking the vibe of games like Outlast and other such first-person survival horrors that had came out in the recent years, but when you think about how many games wholesale stole their identities from the earlier Resident Evil games,
it's kind of just coming full circle.
Right, turnabout's fair play. And the one thing about Resident Evil is they managed to still make it uniquely feel like their world. And it is a continuation of the Resident Evil story, while it reminds me a lot of Mortal Kombat 9. In many ways, it's a reboot because it's so far away and in such a new world of its predecessors, but it is invariably tied to that story.
Yeah.
Especially without giving away the ending, because even though I haven't gotten there myself, I know what happens. But they bring back a lot of elements that were, quite frankly, missing from the last couple of games. It feels like that whole survival thing because you're always low on ammo. There's enemies there's tyrant-type enemies that you can't really kill, you can just subdue. There's evasion levels, there's multiple point of views to play from. It's really got those classic Resident Evil feels to it, and that's a very big deal. You transpose that to the Resident Evil movie, and dear God. I'm going to take a page from the Real Spoilers Guys playbook, which, by the way, you should check them out on iTunes. Real Spoilers, REEL. They're good dudes if you like a more in-depth movie podcast or movie review. I will suggest that if you plan to see the movie they're going to talk about that week, see the movie first, especially if you don't want the ending spoiled, because they don't bury the lead. Real Spoilers, I mean, it's like a book club for movies, so they go through everything. And I like to argue with them on Facebook when, they got a guy on there who purports himself to be a gamer, but in a wrestling fan, but he's not really wrong, but his opinions say otherwise, let's say. In fact, I kind of got onto him today when he was talking about he was talking about Resident Evil 7 and pointing out like, oh, it's a reboot. It has nothing to do with the other games. I go, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Did you not see what happens at the end? Yes, it does. Anyway, in fact, they say it takes place 16 years after or 6 years or something like that, a number of years after Resident Evil 6. So those events happened.
Oh, wow. I figured it would have done something like a reboot type thing where they go back.
No. It's still continuing. It's the next evolution of Resident Evil. They just decided rather than to keep chasing down the same players who really no longer have any stories to tell, they'll do someone new, which is the exact opposite of what the new movie did. We're back with all the same characters and their clones, and God only knows who's real. Mila Jovovich from every scene I've seen. Now, I will preface that I have not seen the movie all the way through. But you don't have to for these kind of movies. Knowing the plot review, seeing all the extended clips I've seen, there is nothing that suggests that I'm wrong. And if you think I am wrong, comment on Facebook or here on YouTube or whatever. But her acting is just completely checked out. They have this just really dumb idea to try to make all the other movies fall in line and tie everything off together. And in reality, it just makes every action before seem pointless. And it's not even a good plot twist in the end of, oh, Umbrella was really just trying to save the world from overpopulation and, the clones of all these rich people, because of course, rich people are bad guys, and it's true. I'm not saying it's not necessarily true, but, it's such a trite, overdone thing where the rich are going to be the ones to survive and not the poor. It's like, you're better than that, Resident Evil. You could have had a better plot twist than that.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking about another thing said by the Real Spoilers guys, which is they had a conversation as to why you can't make a great game movie. I can't think of one. I mean, I think of ones that were okay or fell into that can't be so bad they're good, but can you think of one really good movie based on a video game?
Well, I mean, like, when you think of... It depends on, like, your criteria. If you mean, like, the live-action ones, those are almost always trash. But then you get a couple of the ones, like, maybe Final Fantasy Having Children, but that was made by specifically the same people, and it was more just an action flick. So it kind of worked. But, when you get to something like... Wasn't there a Street Fighter movie live-action that was just trash?
Well, there was two. The Legend of Chun-Li was just trash. But the original one with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia fell into that campy, warm place in people's hearts where... Because you had Raul Julia acting his ass off. Because the guy never understood the concept of a bad performance. And his performance was so out of place that it made it come off as campy and crazy, but that fit considering he was playing in Bison.
Yeah.
So that worked. His was the only acting in that movie that worked. Well, actually, Grandel Bush did pretty good as Balrog, so I gotta give them credit. Now,
I think the only other one I can think of that, like, I know a lot of people probably didn't like it, but one personally I kind of liked was there was like a mid-2000s era Tekken movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, when you kind of compare it to the actual series itself, probably wasn't that good. But for what it was, I kind of enjoyed it. There were some fun fight scenes, even though it kind of took its own take on the universe.
Which happens a lot in movies, and we'll get to that in a second. But when you were talking about the few good movies out there, a lot of them being CGI or cartoon was because they could either have dead-on visuals to the characters you're already familiar with.
Right.
Or they could even bring in the voice actors responsible, and it felt in that universe in a way live-action movies can't.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, which also ties into our point earlier about games that are too long. True great games with these true immersive experiences, when you boil everything down, comes down to about an hour or two at most of great deep cutscenes. There are some games that are longer, like the old Xenogears and stuff, but I'm talking about the ones that stand the test.
Or Metal Gear Solid.
Right. Well, not even that one. That one's not even as bad.
Oh, no, those have really long cutscenes is what I was referring to.
Well, yeah, the later ones do, but the original one doesn't. The Metal Gear Solid, I should say, doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is why Metal Gear Solid is one of the most favorite, and the rest sort of just keep falling away. That proves my point. And that is, you get about an hour to maybe two of cutscenes at the most, and you get about 8 to 10 hours of in-depth gameplay, the gameplay that actually moves the story. So you've got all of that stuff, and now you're a Hollywood director, and the best thing you can do is either break it into these 2 hour-and-a-half to 2 hour chunks, or you try to condense all of that down into one chunk that's, an hour-and-a-half to 2 hours. Plus, you're doing it either in a world that's never going to match because it's a computer-generated world versus reality with people who are never going to match.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, comic book movies work. Well, that idea that when you read a book, you build your own world, even when it's a graphic novel like a comic, because you see snapshots.
Snapshots, or it's just words.
Right. It's stills and words. So you still have to take that in your head. So it's fun to take what you see in your head and try to build it against or compare it against what they build on a set.
Right, the visuals that you imagine versus what they create.
And then the worst argument is usually, oh, well, the book was better. The problem with games are you can't recreate that first time experience. Like the first time we saw Hugh Jackman as Wolverine unsheath his claws.
Yeah.
In live action, quote unquote, because it was computer generated, but still, there was nothing like that before. There was no experience like that before. We had cartoons, but that's still that made up fantasy world.
Right, it's just drawings.
This was a man, a tangible man, unsheathing these claws out of his skin. Well, in video games, you can't, it doesn't matter how many times you recreate, let's take Skyrim the movie, the first time you fight a dragon. We've already seen by this point in time in history, a couple hundred movies where somebody can fight a dragon. And we played through it
killing a couple hundred dragons in the game.
Right.
It lost its charm.
The charm is gone. And that recreation of that magic and that suspension of belief that you need to draw people in is gone in those. And what were you going to say?
I was going to say, you also lose the interactivity of it because from a video game, a lot of these scenes are either ones you're directly involved in. If it's like action cut scene or a fight even. Mm-hmm. And then you're either just directly recreating it, which, again, you kind of lost the charm. You've already done it.
Right. Or you change it or attempt to set a story in that world, but it's so hard to do because most of those worlds,
are complete.
if they're good enough to warrant a movie, like you just said, are either complete or where that's going. And if you take a character that fits somewhere else and you move them around, you break that mystique. And I know a lot of that could be solved by people just shutting up, but video games are such, for the video games that stand up and aren't just shovelware that get bought by a bunch of people and forgotten, the games that everybody comes back to, the modern classics to the retro, is because there was something to the experience that hooked you. And that's why it's so hard to replicate it on film. It isn't that the stories aren't good. It isn't that the worlds aren't good. It's just that you've already done the best thing you could ever do for a story. It'd be the same way as if they made a truly interactive X-Men comic. There would never be a way to do an X-Men movie again because you were Wolverine or you were Jean Grey or you were Storm or you were Cyclops for however long it lasted. Well, we were whoever we were in those games for as long as they lasted. And
yeah,
that's where
if you like RPGs or something.
Exactly.
With the big enough stories that warrant a
which
movie.
are the ones, yes, that people think warrant a movie. That's why I was kind of happy when The Last of Us movie started getting a little bit on the derailed side, is because as much as on the one hand I'd love to see that play out in the full screen, if they changed anything I'd be furious.
Well,
but
was it a movie that was involving the same characters?
Well, yeah. I
didn't look a lot into it.
So they were wanting to tell Sam and Ellie's story, and B, if you did decide, well, we can't touch that main story that everybody who's into that game has already seen, so let's set it in that world, well, then you just have a stock zombie movie.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's a different kind of zombie, but that was no different than when they did 28 Days Later, so we've already seen different zombies. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there as my argument as to why getting any kind of great video game movie is nigh on impossible. So, anyway, so what was this news you were talking about? I think you said for Final Fantasy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a lot of hype that was being built up around, I think, one of the big anniversary dates for, I can't remember if it was for Final Fantasy or Square Enix, but they were basically putting out like, oh, get ready for some news. And essentially the news boiled down to, the game is still coming, but it's not coming out yet, and we don't have any actual news to announce. Like, that you'll have to wait a little bit longer for like Kingdom Hearts 3 and the remake of FX7.
Kingdom Hearts 3. Do you really think there's ever going to be a Kingdom Hearts 3?
No.
They're going to do we're going to get to Kingdom Hearts 2.9999994 so they can do 5 more.
Oh yeah.
And then finally for, console revisions later, we'll get a PS2 styled Kingdom Hearts 3 as a mobile app.
Oh yeah.
Mark my words, it'll happen. Anyway, I figured it wasn't much because you kept trying to put it off, but I figured you did the homework, so
yeah.
I'd at least let you have your moment. So, before we move on to wrestling, there's a couple other things can go off sheet here a little bit. Music this week, back on the 3rd, Dave Haas. Now, if you guys aren't sure who he is, he was formerly the lead singer of the Loved Ones. And I guess formerly is a little bit rough because he still does stuff with them, or as them, I should say, because he was one of those guys who pretty much owned everything in the band. So if you're familiar with any of their work, he's got a new album out called Bury Me in Philly. And it is probably the best blending of punk and folk outside of Flogging Molly.
Ooh.
Especially this album. He's had a couple albums before, Resolutions, which had a lot of sort of upbeatness to it and a lot of sort of looking at life and deciding, hey, not in that stupid self-helpy way of I'm a great person, but more just in a, hey, you know what? I'm going to go out and do things I like to do. Not go out and change the world, but, as one saw talking about spending more time with his brother and going out and riding his bike and being out in nature a little bit, but not in a preachy everybody needs to way. Just like, hey, man, this is my resolutions. I'm going to do this kind of stuff. I'm going to get into shape. I'm going to, go out to the lake more and do some charity. And it's, then he had an album that called Devour that dealt a lot with betrayal. And really, if you're an atheist like me, there's a lot of songs in there that could very well tell the story as to someone's loss of faith. And even if you're not, don't let that scare you if you're not, because it's done in that ambiguous way where it can apply to a lot of different forms of loss and loss through betrayal. But there's a great song called Benediction off that album that I cannot recommend highly enough. And then this current album is a lot of in between. There's a lot of upbeatness to it, but there's also a lot of frustration in it. And a lot of the frustration songs stem from the world around him more than anything else. So if you really like music that's emotional without being just sad emotional, some upbeat mixed in, it's definitely an album worth checking out. Also, the only real bit of TV news I want to point out, well, there's two things. One's an observation. The observation is it just me, or is the return of The Walking Dead after its Christmas break really felt low this year?
Like the hype around it? Or
yeah.
Like all the advertisements?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've been getting a lot of sponsored links on Facebook where they're just piping you the same shit. So I've been seeing that a lot, but I mean, I haven't been looking
last
at it a
year
lot.
And even up to last year, there was all these people sharing, oh my God, this many days till Walking Dead's back, and your February, and it's Hearts and Flowers, my February, and it's a dead zombie. And I still see some of those, don't get me wrong, it's not totally gone, but man, that used to flood my wall, and right now it's a few drips. And I realize in the climate we're in now, politically and everything else, there's more important things going on. But even still, other shows, my wall exploded with my other announcement about Peter Capaldi leaving Doctor Who at the next Christmas episode.
Who?
Peter Capaldi, Doctor Who, the hell cares? Can't take credit. That's a Mystery Science Theater joke. And before you all burn down my wall or burn down the Facebook page, I don't hate Doctor Who. In fact, I like the Strax Potato guy. He was funny. And I like some of the episodes I've seen. It's just, it's one of those things that has existed for so long and has so much canonical things in it that I just don't have time. It's a realm for its fans, and I just don't have time to learn a new realm. So
reminds me of
the Patton Oswalt bit, yes. But unlike him, where he did learn his daughter's realm about My Little Pony, I don't have time to learn Doctor Who. I'll leave that to Ashley and the hens to cackle about, as I call the collective group of my wife, her best friend, and our roommate when they get off on a tangent about Sailor Moon. Oh, yeah. It just turns into hens cackling. Anyway, so we're going to get to the final part of the night, and probably some of the biggest news, and that's a lot of WWE news post-Royal Rumble. And I'm kind of glad it took us a whole nother week on top of it to be able to get back to you guys, because they've had a big thing go down between the Rumble and now, which is Seth Rollins' knee, his surgically repaired knee, tearing his MCL again. Now, this isn't as bad as his first knee injury. They're only looking at 8 weeks of recovery, which tells me if they are doing surgery, it's minimally invasive and likely more just a repair than a outright full-on tore off the bone like before. But still, he's going to be out to just before WrestleMania in the best circumstance after Samoa Joe's debut.
Yeah.
Which is funny because...
I was going to say, didn't he just debut tonight? He was
signing? Yeah, tonight was official contract signing, but he had debuted in a run-in that, caused the injury before. Oh. And what's funny is I was talking later on about how, we're getting near NXT call-up season, and we'll get to this later. I had Joe in my list just because he wasn't at the last takeover that I had seen, or wasn't wrestling, I should say, the last takeover, which is usually a sign, but obviously we saw what came to pass with that. But we'll get to that in a minute. So first we'll talk about the Royal Rumble. Now, you watched some of it with me, right? You watched a lot of it. Actually, you watched a fair amount of the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, I was kind of like peeking at it from my room, but
yeah, you were still in and out, but you saw a lot of the main Rumble itself.
Also, can I deviate from the wrestling topic for a bit for another little announcement?
Yeah, what's up?
Were you ever a fan of the Samurai Jack show back in the day?
Yeah, it was all right. And yeah, it's coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, it got announced. And actually, just today, there was a trailer shown off from Toonami that's coming back on 3/11/17. And there's like a really good quality trailer showing like action scenes and everything. Watching it now, like on my Facebook feed, it came up again. They're really like matched the style, but updated it. That really cool, like simplistic but futuristic style.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they made it a lot prettier.
But there's a lot of still like more serious stuff that they used to have, because like a couple of scenes you could see this evil henchman of Aku, almost looks like a female ninja, basically just shanks someone in the face with like a blood spurt and everything.
Yeah,
they're right there. You go.
Yeah, they're definitely keeping the adult edge. It's definitely a show.
Well, it's
more for an older audience.
Yeah, but that's the cool thing is like of usual remakes, especially like ones.
Well, this isn't a remake. This is a continuation.
True, but
they're not remaking this. This is picking up where the last one left off.
Right. Well, it's continuing. 50 years in the future.
Yeah,
Jack hasn't aged because of Aku's magic pulling him in the future, and now he's got to find the katana and everything. It looks awesome.
Right, so we'll definitely be worth checking out. But let's get back to wrestling because we're already hitting near the upper limit of our time. So here's the thing about the Royal Rumble. What's funny is a lot of people treated it like it was terrible. First of all, here's reasons why it wasn't. A, we saw Roman Reigns lose twice in one night. And I don't mean that like hating Roman Reigns. I mean that because sooner or later, and I know all you smart marks out there are going to want to kill me, sooner or later we're all going to be cheering for him because he's got the talent. I think you put him with a good manager and you let him be, a tweener guy for 6 months and you keep him out of anything above the U.S. title picture or Intercontinental or whatever it is on Raw. No, it's United States picture for that time, and you got yourself a better heel or a better babyface because he was liked before he got hurt. The only reason all the smart marks turned on him was when he got hurt, they still kept him active in the fans' mind. They gave him the slammy, and you knew when he came back he was going to be the guy. And oh my God, no, a guy we were cheering for like crazy up until he got hurt is going to get pushed more. Sometimes I agree with guys like, and I'm going to feel dirty saying this, but if you watch his Wrestling with Regret interview, he's right. One of the few things he's gotten right, and that's Vince Russo. When he was asked, what would you do about Roman Reigns if you were still writing Being Boot? He'd go, well, I'd look at the ratings because are they changing the channel when he's on? Or is it just the smarky crowd booing him for, trying to be cutesy, more or less, was his answer. And he's right. Roman Reigns does get ratings. John Cena got ratings. I may not have been a Cena fan. I may have hated a lot about what he did, but I never looked at WWE and said, why is he still on top? Well, when he outsells everybody else merchandise 2-1 and ratings go up when he's on the show, and his presence was so sorely missed in 2008, an early return at the Rumble gave him one of the biggest pops anyone ever had.
Yeah.
What that there's things there, and it happens with Reigns sometimes too. So it's going to happen. But anyway, we're getting off topic. And actually, I also want to talk about John Cena for a minute, but we'll get to his point moment. First, you had, a lot of good matches. You had the club winning the tag titles on the pre-show. I didn't like that it was the pre-show, but I do like that they did finally give them the belts. It's a step in the right direction. I think they could be a good foil for for Sheamus and Cesaro through WrestleMania. I'm a little split on who I'd give the belts to if I had to book it at Mania, because it could go either way and still keep both teams strong. It really just depends on where you want to go after that. If you want to continue to push Sheamus and Cesaro as a tag team, give them the belts back. If you want to have them part mutually, but still have respect for each other and kind of keep them both in that babyface, or let them both be tweeners or whatever, then you could have them lose the belt, but have them lose, again by shenanigans and just decide it's not worth to keep going after. You have a lot more roads this way. The female title match was, unfortunately, since everybody knows their plan for Charlotte, we all knew Bayley wasn't going to do it, so I kind of checked out during the match. It was a great match, but it's that Roman Reigns thing of once you know that the office behind that one person, it's really hard to get invested in their matches. So, but it was still a good match. And, the rest of the undercard leading up to the Royal Rumble itself was good. But I want to talk to you guys about something out there. And again, don't hate me, smart wrestling fans. And I know, Brandon, you're kind of over there checked out because you're not as big of a wrestling fan as me.
Sorry.
But you have felt, you've agreed with me on this. There was a time when hating John Cena was appropriate.
Yeah.
For the same reason why hating Triple H during the much maligned, quote-unquote, reign of terror was appropriate. When you could see him holding down talent, and like what he did to Wade Barrett, what he did to the Nexus, really, what he did to Rey Mysterio when they were setting up for his return match versus Punk. There was a lot of things John Cena's done to dominate the main event picture when there was the whole triangle effect of big monster heel comes up, gets booked to the moon, even wins a lower level championship, and then LOL Cena wins.
Mm.
Anyway, though, what I'm getting at is he's done his time, though. He's been really, truly out of the main event scene as champion for a long time. His four-ways back into it have honestly been needed, because AJ Styles, to the casual fan, needed that huge, clean win he got over Cena. And I mean, it was clean as a whistle to set himself up as a real contender. He got it, he got the belt, and he ran with it. Now, I know a lot of you are like, well, why did Cena have to take the belt from him? We've got years of AJ Styles left. We don't have that long with Cena left.
Yeah.
A lot of backstage news about him being unhappy about payouts. Guys like Goldberg and Lesnar coming in and getting as much money as him for part-time deals. He's getting a lot of attention from Hollywood after his role in the train wreck and his SNL appearance, that, he's going to probably be going the road to the Rock soon. And that's fine. He deserves to tie Flair's record, because in the post-boom years of wrestling, he's been the sole profit getter. I mean, other guys have been great. I'm not saying there hasn't been, but when you talk about the dollars and cents, again, when you're out selling merchandise 2-1, you've earned your spot, if nothing else, from that merit alone. So, all that aside, plus his lower schedule has allowed him to work excellent matches. You name a singles match in recent history that was, that wasn't, okay, I guess the better way to word it is, name a John Cena match in recent history that was better than the one he just had with Styles at the Rumble. It was a great match. It was a solid 4.5 to 5 star match. It kept the crowd engaged. Honestly, the pop Cena got for winning was probably his biggest pop since 2008.
Dang.
I mean, he put on such a great match that for that one fleeting moment, beating one of the hottest guys, who it didn't hurt to lose, it really didn't hurt him to lose, kind of rebaptized Cena as a great babyface again, and as a hero again. He's tied for the record. He's probably going to lose it at Elimination Chamber to Bray Wyatt, or even Randy Orton is on the table because he won the Rumble, and it would be an interesting thing if you had Bray convince Randy or command Randy to give him his number one contendership. There's ways you could go with this, but we're going to see Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton for SmackDown's belt at Mania. They're building to it, and you know what? It's if they do it right, it'll be a masterclass in long-term storytelling. Because you can have Randy Orton say, I broke up the Wyatt family.
Ooh.
I took away everything. I couldn't get the win on you when it was you and the family because there was just too many of you. Harper doesn't trust you anymore. Even knowing that I played you, he doesn't trust you now because you wouldn't listen to him. Rowan is probably not going to trust you when he comes back because of the same reason. It is just you and me, Bray. Now, as much as I'm enjoying Orton like this, the only way it's going to work and the only way it's going to be a true star-making moment is Wyatt has to go over. I mean, you can't really book it any other way and it makes sense. Which means the WWE is going to give it to Orton. We know that.
Yeah.
So, more reasons why the Rumble wasn't so bad. First of all, even though there was a lack of like surprise returns, we did get to see Ty Dillinger come in at number 10. They did that to give that to the fans because of his whole Perfect 10 gimmick. You know, and they've since said it's not a main roster debut. It was just a little thing for the fans. You had Gallagher from the Cruiserweight division show up with his umbrella and rack Jericho with it, then spin it around after he opened it. You know, fun spots because any surprise return you would have had was going to get overshadowed because there was just so many main eventers due into the Rumble that there was no reason to add anybody else. You had the draws already there. It was very reminiscent of the 1992 Royal Rumble, which is arguably one of the best Rumbles ever. So, what else were you going to do? Now, let me ask your opinion on this, Brandon. Would you have rather had that strong... Because you watched a lot of the Rumble itself.
More or less, yeah.
I mean, glanced at it. Would you have rather had that very concise and very precise storytelling that had a lot of great callbacks to feuds and past stuff so storylines kept advancing? Or would you rather it have just been, here's old guy number 1, 2, whatever, come back out?
The first option.
And it would have distracted from all those big moments because you had, when Bray Wyatt got in the ring, you had Xavier Woods remember that they had an issue and that at one point in time, Bray Wyatt started exerting sort of a mind game control over him. You know, you had Braun Strowman going on a tear, and then you had Baron Corbin eliminating him to continue to make him looking strong. I mean, you had Goldberg crushing Lesnar again to further their angle because you're right. You know at some point Lesnar's going to get his comeuppance, and tonight on Raw they really sort of laid out what's going to happen because we now know for sure Goldberg's going to fight Owens at their next pay-per-view. What is it? Fastlane. So,
yeah.
You know, we already know Goldberg's going to pick up the belt, and it's going to be Lesnar and Goldberg for the belt. Good. I really wish it wouldn't be, but good. If you're going to do it, if you're going to douche out the stench of their last Mania match, that's the way to do it. Give them stakes that are believable that these two men would fight over. And then suspend your disbelief because we all know that that's Goldberg's last contracted match, and if they're smart, they'll stay that way because he is a very short shelf life attraction. You know. And it would reassert, because once he beats him again, you have all that quote-unquote lost aura from Lesnar, which he hasn't lost a damn bit of aura, comes flooding back, but comes back with that caveat that, yes, he can be beaten, so that when you finally let a new up-and-coming talent get that rub on him, it won't make everything that it feels like he's done before be a waste. That's the one thing nobody got, including legends like Jim Cornette didn't get about him losing to Goldberg so fast. Like, oh my God, it should have been a young guy. No, it shouldn't, because if it would have been a young guy, we all would have shit on it. Because we all would have said, oh, they're just doing that to put this guy over because it's old school wrestling. And when that's that predictable, it doesn't work. I mean, you could see that. You're not even as deep into wrestling on the inside side as I am, and you called out BS moments like that where you've asked me, hey, are they doing that because of X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
I mean, the Goldberg moment was a legitimately shocking moment. It's done nothing to take the full aura off Lesnar. We know he can be beaten now, but we know, heck, it took a legend of the business to beat him. So, even if he beats that legend, there's that door opening to let someone come in and beat him and be believable. in a very weird way than there was before. So we'll see how that plays out. But we definitely know that we definitely know where we're going for at least most of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Goldberg or Undertaker getting taken out and the stare down with Reigns. So even though Reigns lost as well, we know that means that there's probably going to be something between the two of them. I'd still rather see it, or would still rather love it to be Cena and Undertaker, especially if you throw the retirement stipulation. But they've done such a good job of somewhat getting Cena back to the babyface side in the fans' eyes with his win. And yes, a lot of it went away by SmackDown. A lot of fans were back to being 50-50 on him, but I think it's become the in thing to do at the shows. I don't think they feel that, especially after Royal Rumble, I don't think they feel that way as much as they did, but it's still, it's still the fun thing to do when his music comes on to go, John Cena sucks.
Yeah.
So, which we still love to do. Our Mark roommate, we live with a Mark. I mean, she'll love a guy until they turn heel. I don't like them anymore. I mean, perfect Mark for the business.
Yeah, the setup is so great for you all the time.
Yeah, we taught the 4-year-old to walk up to her and go, John Cena sucks. And it just drives her crazy. But anyway, that's still getting off on that tangent about him. So anyway, could be fun to see where that goes with Reigns and Undertaker. Would really rather it be Cena, but we'll see what happens. Let's jump down to NXT for a minute, because it's Mania season, which means there's going to be call-ups. Some big things happened at the TakeOver San Antonio event. I didn't watch it as much as I watched the Royal Rumble. I haven't had time. I really do want to go back. But there's a lot of frustrating moments. First, you had the Authors of Pain taking over the belts, or taking the belts off of Team DIY. Now, I haven't seen any of the post-script. I haven't read the things, so hey, if I'm completely off base here, tell me. Maybe they're working an angle where Ciampa and Gargano finally split and fight. But if not, I could see them coming up to the main roster to be the guys to go after the club if they want to keep the belts on the club. And I am 105% in on that. Because I could see them going after the club, and I could see Dash and Wilder coming on SmackDown Live to go after their tag team champions.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine the Revival going up against the Usos or the Vaudevillains, or, it wouldn't take much for SmackDown to fix their tag team division, because I will admit the Red Brand tag team division is a lot stronger. But that's what it is. I mean, you watched, Sheamus, Cesaro, really good storytelling there. So that's what I'm hoping happened out of there. Obviously, like I said before, Joe was only watching at ringside. So he debuted and injured Raw, so I don't think he'll be sent back down to finish up any angles. It looks like, in fact, tonight on Raw, they had him sign a contract to be on the main roster, basically because the plans to use him as a hired gun, as muscle for Triple H, and his feud with Rollins just went out the window with the injury. I'm trying to get all this in before the hour mark. We may go a little bit over, so just bear with me. But we did get to see Bobby Roode win the NXT belt. I could see them putting, even though the rumor is it's going to be Styles versus Shane McMahon, I'd rather see it be Styles versus Shane McMahon bringing in Shinsuke Nakamura.
Oh, yeah.
I would put $5,000, dollars on the table right now in Monopoly money for that.
I was actually about to ask, what has he been up to? Because I haven't been.
Well, no, he at the same TakeOver special, he lost the belt to Roode.
Ah.
Which, I mean, if you're going to lose to someone, may as well be someone glorious.
Glorious.
Yes, that theme is gonna rule for a long time. That is the ultimate douche heel move. Like Mr. Perfect's theme, which is basically the Bobby Roode gimmick he's doing, had that air about it, that I'm better than you air, and it was just an instrumental. Bobby Roode's theme takes it a step further with this angelic chorus, basically, singing that he's glorious and will defeat everyone. Come on, what more do you want?
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully Nakamura...
that is a total Ice song.
Yeah. Nakamura hopefully comes up in time for Mania or shortly thereafter and sides with, Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon. Ooh, Daniel Bryan, there could be another thing. He came to the WWE to work with Daniel Bryan. That's never going to happen. So he's on Daniel Bryan's behalf to go after The Miz. Nice. I mean, there's no scenario, unfortunately, at least in the beginning of his time on the main roster, that I see Nakamura fitting him at Raw unless it's just to fight Brock Lesnar again. But either way, I would love to book him on SmackDown, either to go after The Miz, which might be a little bit beneath him, which is not a bad thing, because it would only be beneath him in the eyes of us hardcore fans. For the casual fan, it could be a great introduction because The Miz works so well with anyone. Especially if you give him that backing of being a hired gun for the permanently on the shelf Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
You got yourself a great follow-up. And finally, I want to get to Asuka.
What's she been up to?
Still literally beating the hell out of everything with a vagina.
Sounds awesome.
It is. The woman who is the embodiment of every evil, mean, powerhouse diva they've ever had, but manages to still be in the body of any woman, of a woman they could put into any glamour form, and she would fit right in with the models. And again, I'm not one of those people who actually thinks that matters, but I like that they're flipping the script a little bit, because usually even the medium-built girls like her are still presented as weaker than these bigger, beefier girls.
Like, what was Nyx?
Yeah, Nia Jax. I was going to say, one of my problems with how they book Nia Jax is they book her as this unstoppable monster just because she's on the plus side, but they book her as this unstoppable monster still, and she just doesn't have that aura about her. Like I've said before, and I meant it, she comes out to this crowd and she has this look of almost, I don't want to say fright, but this look of just sort of,
almost apathy, like she doesn't want to, she's almost like not looking at the crowd, like she doesn't want their eyes on her.
And it takes that intimidation they want from her away. So why not book her properly? She could be, even as a heel, she doesn't have to be a babyface to do this. She could be their perfect sort of, body plus or body positive image person. She could have, if they want to keep her heel, she could have this drop dead diva, shitty attitude of I'm better than you. Yes, honey. Let her be all the classic Facebook memes that are going out around right now. Oh no, honey, you're skinnier than me, not prettier. Or, yeah, so what? My thighs touch. They also touch the side of your boyfriend's head. But they obviously wouldn't be able to do that in PG era, but they could do a more effective heel role for her as a diva who just accepts that her body is a larger body, and let Asuka
and lives it.
Right, and let Asuka and Ember Moon be the feral, violent, aggressive, borderline heel, in Asuka's case, females, because it just makes more sense. We've seen in real fighting these small powerhouse women put on a performance that rivals their male counterparts. We don't need that old school stodgy image of just the bigger woman's automatically the stronger woman.
Right.
So, and that leads me to what I would do with Asuka. Now, there's two ways to look at this. You can either do it with the traditional post-WrestleMania call-up, or you could do it in time for the WrestleMania call-up, but they've more or less already started the road of it being Bayley and Charlotte at Mania for an eventual Bayley win, and then Bayley and a heel Sasha Banks to feud. Which is still a way you can go eventually, but I think that's shooting their load. Because what you have is Asuka, who is basically undefeated as far as I can tell in NXT. If she has been defeated, it's been through no fault of her own in tag matches. And then you have Charlotte, who the whole thing they're milking is 13 or so pay-per-views straight of not losing. So, in the window to do this before WrestleMania is pretty much closed, but it's still possible. You have it be Asuka as still NXT Women's Champion. And the reason why I mentioned Ember Moon is they've already started this, but this is important. Devoting her time between defending at TakeOver specials and, that are coming up between now and then, if there even is any, or defending on NXT The Show, while also taunting and challenging Charlotte for the women's belt. And you have her, go after her, and you have her attack her after matches or call her out or, beat opponents on Raw that were from, fellow NXT opponents or whatever. There, however you want to book it. But you have her taunt Charlotte, and you have Charlotte be smart and say, I don't want no part of this.
Yeah.
And if you want to use this as a slow babyface turn for Charlotte, because I think if you're going to have Banks turn heel, you kind of need Charlotte to be face. Those two really don't work well when they're on the same page, even though they were a really popular tag team when they were on the same page in NXT. I think it's been played a little much. But if you don't, fine. You can keep it face Asuka, but you just keep having her challenge. And at Mania, or whatever pay-per-view they finally meet at, it's streak versus streak. It's champion versus champion. It's dominance of NXT versus dominance of Raw. And I mean, I've already given you everything you needed to sell a ticket. It's one of those few chances to have a legitimate match built around who could win, because you're going to drive the Smarkies nuts as to who they're going to take away that streak from. And if it's not doing as well on TV as you want it to, then you have Asuka still stay an NXT superstar who is just trying to bring the belt to NXT to continue to make it the strongest women's division in the world. Because more or less it is. Or if it's working, which I think it would, because she's something so different. I mean, she's one of the few Asian characters, which really, in fairness, they've been good with all of them that are out lately. They've been better about all of their Asian characters being treated with more deference, but, she's really being treated right. They really do that whole thing well. So why not keep it going and let her be that attraction fans aren't used to seeing? And you have her going after Charlotte, and if it works, then down in NXT, you have Ember Moon getting frustrated with the fact that the champion's never there.
Yeah.
And she's demanding to take her spot. And still staying a face, because I think they're still playing Ember Moon as a face. But even if not, or if she's a heel, she's attacking other females after matches and calling her out. So that if once Asuka wins the woman's belt, if this works, and you decide to give her the rub to make her an immediate main event player on Raw, then you have William Regal say, well, winning a main roster title, and so that you don't get the smart markies yelling at you for how it was done with Owens. You say, well, after the Kevin Owens thing and the winning the United States title while still having the NXT title for that brief time, it's been decided that by the WWE Board of Directors and myself that if you win a main roster title, it invalidates your ability to hold an NXT title. So you have her stripped of the belt so she never loses it. She never loses the NXT Women's title. She goes down as an undefeated champion.
Ooh.
Tournaments held. You give Ember a chance to take out all of her frustration. She runs through the tournament. Maybe bring back a legend or two and a big name indie talent to give them a try just to help solidify her. Boom, you have Ember Moon as the new champion in NXT. You have Asuka as the champion on the main brand. Then you start feeding her the horsewomen basically in a replay of NXT. First you have her do a face versus face with Bayley. Then you have her do a series against a heel Sasha Banks. Then you have her come back around full circle and go after Charlotte again. And you just kind of keep that up until the shine's off the apple enough that you could then really make it count when she's beaten. And then when she's beaten, you've added so much credibility to the belt. Because here you've had a person whose lineage is a champion, predates them even being on the main show, finally being beaten by someone. And if you do it for the right person, that could make that someone just as big of a deal as she was. So that's how I'd book Asuka. What do you think?
Honestly, I kind of zoned out of it, but yeah, I mean...
zoned out a bit.
That went over my head.
We need a third person who knows wrestling. If you're out there and you're a fan of the show and you're in the area, if you're one of my friends listening, one of the 5 people who listen to this thing, if you're one of my friends who knows wrestling and you want to come in just to talk those parts, let me know, because...
I'm sorry, I know.
It'd be welcome. So I guess what I should say out there is, what do you guys think out there Do you like my plan for booking her? Would you do it? Would you not do it? Leave us a comment. But I think that's going to do it for this week's show. As always, you can find us at facebook.com/nerdsatnight, Twitter at nerdsatnight, nerdsatnightgaming.com. I'm sure somewhere else online we're out there.
Pretty much Nerds at Night at most places.
Yep. Just search for Nerds at Night, Nite. You'll find us somewhere. Leave us a comment. Please like, share, and subscribe. There should be, I believe, tomorrow another YouTube video dropping. Round 2 of our wrestling game series. We're going to start recording here in the next couple of days of the next set of videos. I think we're going to do some platformers where we either, if they're 2 players at the same time, we'll play them together. If not, we'll take turns, see who gets the farthest in the set amount of time. So, some other good things. Also, leave us some ideas on games you want to see us play. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, hopefully if it is multiplayer, we can screw each other over, because that's always a good time.
Well, that's the point, is who gets the farthest. Well, if I can cause you to die.
Yep.
All right. So, for Nerds Night Gaming, I'm Kid Thunder DJ.
And I'm Fire 47.
All right. Have a good night.
Later.